Would Nigel Farage make a good Prime Minister? We're taking your calls on this right now. Now, Nigel was questioned about wanting the top job on last night's I'm a Celebrity, and let's have a listen to what he said.
Would you ever want to run?
As Janet? I don't know. We'll see. Depends how much mess the country gets in.
Really?
Honestly don't know. I mean, it's not an easy job. As for little me, there's a lot of speculation that after they lose the next election, maybe Nigel becomes leader of the Tory party one day. So there's a lot of chatter about it. Whether it's going to happen, I've no idea. Important thing, though, is to say this. Never say never.
Ooh, well, that's not a no, is it? Belinda, I'm going to come to you first, because you know Nigel quite well, don't you? So do you think he'd make a good Prime Minister, though?
I think he would make an excellent Prime Minister, probably one of the best we've had since Churchill. I think he has the leadership qualities. I think he has the courage of his convictions. At the moment, we just have flip-flop politicians. They just say what they think people want to hear, and then they flip-flop and change their mind as soon as they're in power. Nigel is the opposite of that. His background, the 30 years he dedicated to making this country self-governing, which is all he did, and the years the media have spent in demonising him, making him into a pantomime villain, when actually he is one of the most kindest, charming, brilliant men I've ever met. And the Brexit Party in the European Parliament was one of the most diverse parties in the whole of Brussels. You know, we had black, brown, white, gay, straight, left, right, you name it, men, women. It was incredibly diverse. None of us would have ever joined the party if we ever thought he had anything dodgy about him. He was deeply tender, incredibly caring, one of the best bosses I've ever had, and I think he would be wonderful for this country.
Well, that's certainly one vote in favour. I'm getting the slight impression, just slight mind, from Tessa's face, which has got a bit of a green colour, you possibly don't agree.
I just zoned out on that. I'm sorry, Belinda. I'm not going to in any way question Nigel Farage's integrity, but the sort of stench of hubris that came off that clip, maybe I'll come in and wipe up the mess, like with a little poop scoop. Here is the architect who created much of the mess. I don't know why he thinks he needs to become Prime Minister, because he was the man who wagged the head of the dog that delivered Brexit, and we know where that landed us. I mean, we can blame the pandemic and inflation as much as we like, but one of the great, and the history will judge it as such, one of the great acts of vandalism that this country has experienced post-war is Brexit. And Nigel Farage, riding the common tiger of migration, tricked people with his charm and charisma, and I've no doubt that he has bundles of charm and charisma, tricked people into voting for a straw horse, because check out the migration figures later today.
What an insult to the people to suggest that they were tricked. This is what we get all the time. You know, Brexiteers, people who are worried about immigration, people who have concerns about the EU gobbling up power, are either thick or stupid, or they were fooled or tricked. Total insult to the people out there. No, I'm just saying that
it's actually a report today, isn't there, that the less intelligent, their words not mine, were more likely to back Brexit.
There has been a mission to demonise anyone who wants to control migration and anyone who wants to leave the EU.
The reason why we were tricked, and I consider myself to be tricked too because I'm living in the same country, is that the promise was migration would come down, we would control our borders. And if you look today at the ballooning migration figures, by the way, over 1 million of which will be from non-EU countries, actually we were tricked, because we all know it's about the economy, stupid. If we need workers, we will get them in from
You're
wherever.
confusing Nigel with the Conservative Party. We gifted the Conservative Party with Brexit. They're using it appallingly, and they're trying to make this country out to be a balance sheet where everyone is just GDP #, if you're a migrant.
Belinda,
and I totally agree with you. The Conservative Party have totally let down the Brexit voters, which is why we need Nigel back.
But forgive me, I can never forget the poster that he peddled, faces of a certain colour queuing up.
It was taken from
and
the
he
Guardian.
and he posed beside it. He rode the
right,
tiger.
OK, I'm glad you mentioned that one, Tessa, because he actually spoke about that in the jungle himself when I think it was Fred, who's also in there with him, said, well, what about that poster? And Nigel, this is what Nigel said, he goes, well, OK, but it does appear to be coming true, doesn't it?
Post Brexit it does, because we now no longer recruit most of our migration, freedom of movement from the east and indeed sometimes the west of Europe. They come from far further afield. And the government are currently panicking because they want to bring family members. If I'm travelling all the way from India to work as a carer in Britain, I might want to bring my child with me.
I'm sorry, but Tessa, why then is Italy experiencing huge amounts of illegal immigration? To do with Brexit? No. Why is France experiencing huge amounts of illegal immigration? It's nothing to do with Brexit, and you know that. Europe is suffering a migrant crisis right now,
but the point
and we're all in
was,
it together.
Belinda,
Stop spreading this false narrative.
We were promised that
Brexit could deliver it. The Tories chose not
to.
But
beyond the nitty-gritty of migration figures, the danger around people like Nigel Farage, and we've seen it with Trump, and we've seen it with Boris Johnson, and we see it today in Holland with Villiers, and we see it so too in Argentina with Mr. Crazy and his chainsaw.
My gosh, you cannot compare.
A bit of charisma does not mean
the Labour Party
leader.
is far more full of racists and sexists. The way they've treated conservative brown and black people, the racism coming from the left.
I'm not just talking about racism.
No, I'm just saying they make Nigel look like a saint. I'm telling you, if I had thought he was racist or experienced in any way, I would not have worked with him.
Are brilliantly passionate.
He's a hero.
And we have got lots of calls coming in this. So, anyway, let's see who Nigel thought would make a good Prime Minister. I mean, he actually said this in the Jungle as well the other night. So who does he think would be, or is, or was a good Prime Minister? Let's have a listen.
Who's your favourite Prime Minister ever in your lifetime?
Ever? In my lifetime? There's only really, in my lifetime, 2 Prime Ministers who've been really strong, who've changed the country. One's Thatcher and one's Blair. I didn't like the way Blair changed the country at all, but I have to admit, he was a strong leader. No, Margaret was a very strong leader, and they were tough times.
Very balanced there, actually, at least. So, OK, so many calls coming in. I thought there would be, because these two are so brilliant on this subject. Right, Jim, we're coming to you first. Jim, you're in Surrey. Good morning, Jim. What would you like to say? Nigel Farage for PM?
Definitely.
Oh, so, OK. So you are Team Farage here. Why do you think he'd be such a good Prime Minister?
I think he's the only person that actually talks sense. And if you really listen to him, he's got everything covered. He knows what he's doing. He's got a good financial background. And it's just everybody seems to hate him that's either woke or hated Brexit.
Oh, I saw Tessa flinching there. You're woke, Tessa.
Jim, I'm not woke, and even if I was, so what? But I don't hate Nigel Farage. I just don't believe he's prime ministerial material. And history tells us that. There are deep and scary, if you like, reflections from the 1930s at the moment, when we had the likes of Mussolini. No, I'm being serious. Mussolini, these very charismatic right-wing politicians. It's so easy to blame the foreigner, take back control, we'll all be all right, Jack. It's just not true. It's dangerous.
That is not what Nigel's doing at all. He's not anti-immigrant. It's about the numbers and the infrastructure. He's made that really clear. It's not Mussolini. All this harping back to the 1930s is really chilling free speech at the moment for people who have genuine concerns about migration.
Do you seriously think he is on a par with Mussolini and Hitler?
No, but I think we need to look at the way in which we've got the rise of the right, the rise of anti-migration, demonising the asylum seeker. Nigel Farage is in the Channel with his tannoy and his scarf, back off asylum seekers. He absolutely peddles that narrative. I am not questioning his integrity. I'm questioning his ability to observe the rule of law as Prime Minister, and even the validity of this debate. It's cheap. It's cheapening us.
OK, right, OK. But more calls coming in. Hey, right, you've heard what Tessa's got to say. They're strong words indeed. Robert, you're in Hertfordshire. Good morning, Robert. What would you like to say?
The fault of Nigel Farage being Prime Minister of this country sends me cold.
Why?
This country is in enough mess as it is at the moment. Just because he's on this celebrity get me out of here, he's made himself noticed. And the man's a nonsense. I mean, for him to be Prime Minister of this country will send us down the drain. We're already in trouble. We're already suffering. We're already... ordinary people are trying to make ends meet. This man is a nonsense. To be Prime Minister, I think I'd immigrate.
I'm sure you won't be alone. Robert, thank you very much for your call. Let's move on to Irene in Warwickshire. Irene, good morning. What would you like to say?
Well, I sometimes think Nigel Farage could be better than the crap that we've got in now.
OK, apologies for anyone that's upset by that language, but this is a subject, obviously, that causes heated opinion. So, yeah, Irene, there's kids probably watching, so let's mind the language. But what were you saying, Irene?
Well, the people that are running the country now have got us in a mess. And I'm upset about it. I'm nearly 90 next year, so I remember going into the common market when I was in my early 40s, and it took about 5 years to settle down then. Things were very expensive till they were sorted out, but now we've got to expect time for things to go back to they were before.
Irene, can I just ask, you've got wonderful life experience there. You've got experience of living through so many periods in our political history. Who would you like to see as Prime Minister come after the general election?
At the moment, I can't think of anybody, to be honest here.
But Irene, isn't one of the reasons why we've got effectively two rather dull technocrats, one in number 10 and the other one hoping to walk through the doors of number 10, isn't that because we've had reckless, charismatic individuals like Boris Johnson, the ilk of which you could replicate or argue to be similar to Nigel Farage? They are the problem that's delivered what you consider to be the current shower.
But Nigel Farage isn't a buffoon like Boris, hanging upside down or whatever he did at one time. Everything he touches is a bit odd.
But Nigel's got great credentials. He's got his huge leadership material, and I totally agree with you. And technocrats, grey suit, spin, scripted gibberish that we've heard again and again and again. It's not working for people anymore.
Belinda,
we need a leader that cares for this country beyond a balance sheet and our values and also our borders. That's what people vote for.
Please, Irene. The reason we're in this mess with the revolving door of prime ministers becoming the butt of jokes in Europe is precisely because of Nigel Farage's Brexit dream.
Right, okay.
The reality has been
thank you. Irene, look what you've done. Thank you very much for your call, Irene. And once again, apologise if you were upset by Irene's language. I understand, strong views. Right, let's go to...
It was worse, apparently, in the House of Commons yesterday. Was it Stockton?
Yes, yeah, well, we're not going. Don't you start.
You're in good company, Irene.
Right, let's go to David in Pontypool. David, save me from this madness. What do you think? Farage for Prime Minister?
I'm used to madness. You should see where I live.
OK. It's not Stockport, is it? Stockport on Tees, wasn't it?
Well, I'm just concerned that if you've got someone on the world stage in a very important position, and they have to make these people understand how that we are a world force and everything. But if they're seen, waving their bums on TV and acting like clowns, I know, as I've just had pointed out to me, that Mr. Trump did it and he got away with it, but that doesn't make it right. And I think that we should be having more dignity. I'm not saying they should all be, straight and straight-laced and wearing suits all the time, but I don't think this kind of behaviour from a
David,
Prime Minister.
Can I just ask, if Nigel Farage hadn't gone into the jungle, and obviously we're talking about this debate because he said it, I think we've lost you. Oh, we've lost you.
But he made a really good point there, addressing Trump. The polarisation of American politics has imperiled the lives of American politicians. There's been 213 attacks since the storm on Capitol Hill. Actually, it's really dangerous what the likes of Trump do.
Right, David, you are still there, and thanks to your call, we are now being treated to a flashback, quite literally, of Nigel Farage's bottom. But, yeah, thanks, David. You're not really helping here today. But
was it Farage's, not Trump's?
It could have been anyone's, really, couldn't it? It wasn't that great.
But Dawn, talking about the international stage really quickly, Nigel, when he walked into the EU Parliament, the most Remainery, fanatical pro-EU members of the EU Parliament, there's so many would hug him and cheer him. He had an incredible...
But we're not talking about his likeability.
No, but actually on the international stage, it matters that you connect with people from other sides of the argument, because the left are quite intolerant. They don't give us the same privilege back.
He was mobbed at the Conservative Party conference as well.
We're not talking about his likeability. We're talking about his suitability to govern.
I think he'd make a fantastic Prime Minister.
Blimey, David. Wow. Thank you very much for your call, David. Let's go to, so many getting calls in. Susanna in Devon. Good morning, Susanna. What do you think? Would Farage make a good Prime Minister?
To be honest, a few years ago, I probably would have said no. But as it currently stands, we've already had the Labour government and it hasn't worked out. We've had the Conservative government, that hasn't worked out. I really think we need somebody new in Parliament speaking for the people. And I believe that he does speak for a majority of people in the country.
That's interesting. That's something that's been said quite a lot, isn't it? That he speaks for the silent majority.
It's a con. He's currently sitting in the jungle with £1.5 million rebooting his formerly blocked Coutts account. He's not working for the people. He's working for Nigel Farage.
He has given up his security, his safety.
Oh, heaven help us.
His career for duty and service for the country. He's given up so much to serve his country, to release us from a power-gobbling EU, and he gets no thanks from it. And I'm sorry, but liberalism has failed Europe. It once was a noble cause, and it's because it went too far and extreme with gender this and CTR there and no borders that it has given birth to the rise of the right. And Nigel Farage is not far right. He's the best we'll get.
I'm just going to leave this debate on this note, seeing as we have two incredibly brilliant, bright, beautiful panellists with me.
It's incredible for a panel where we all look so similar that we
yes, so different.
Yes, exactly. But I just want to, leaving on this one on Nigel Farage, in a Q&A in 2014, he claimed that women were paid less because they were worth far less.
Yay, Belinda.
That was about maternity leave. That was taken out of context.
How dare women have babies?
Never been sexist